HTC One gets version 2, Disney buys 55,000 YouTube channels, and RayBan may soon sell Google Glasses. Get ready for the sunglass holes. All that and more coming up next.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Tuesday, March 25th, 2014. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used Apple and Android devices are worth at Gazelle.com. And by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TNT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Mike Elgin.
And I'm Jason Howell.
Tech News Today explores the big stories of the day in conversation with some of the world's best journalists. Our guest co-anchor today is Jessica Lessin, the founder and editor-in-chief of The Information. Welcome, Jessica.
Good morning.
Yeah, Jessica, we're really excited to have you because, as we were saying earlier, you're both a guest co-anchor and you're also an interview guest. And so you'll be interviewing yourself later, and I'm really looking forward to sitting back and watching that happen.
Thank you. Up for the challenge.
We've also got a studio audience in here. Hello, studio audience. And we love to have studio audience. And if you're ever in the greater Petaluma area, and why would you be? But if you ever are.
Petaluma is pretty great. You're right about that.
It is awesome. If you like chickens and cows, this is the place to come. Definitely come in and come watch the show. We'd love to have you. Well, let's get to the news. HTC launched its HTC One M8 phone this morning. Like the original, the new HTC One has a beautiful aluminum body with a front-facing speakers. The 5-inch screen is a little bigger than the original, and the corners of the phone are rounder. It also has 2 cameras on the back. In other words, all the rumors were true. In other HTC news this morning, the company announced that its Blink Feed home screen interface would become available to non-HTC Android phones on the Google Play Store, which is really cool. And we also learned from some of the documents that were posted on the Play Store that it looks like there's going to be a plain vanilla Google Play version of the HTC One M8. So we're looking forward to that as well. To talk about all this is somebody who knows the phone intimately, Dan Seifert, editor at The Verge. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
In your review today, you asked in the headline, is this the best Android phone yet? Well, is it?
From a hardware perspective, I really think, HTC came out swinging with the new one, and it is a really tremendous device. Last year's model was really good as well. It was a great design, great build quality, really fast performance and things, and they went back to the drawing board, improved a lot of aspects of the phone for this new model. But that's not really the whole story with HTC. I don't think HTC really has ever had a trouble with hardware. They've generally produced excellent phones for years, but they typically have trouble getting people to buy them.
Yeah, that's a helpful feature if you're the company selling them, is when people buy them. Now, one of the weirdest things and wackiest and unusual things about this phone is the camera setup. Now, two aspects of the cameras are weird. One is that there are 2 cameras on the back, and the other is that the front-facing camera, otherwise known as the selfie camera, is higher resolution. It's 5 megapixels as opposed to the 4 megapixel camera on the back. Now, first of all, why are there 2 cameras on the back?
So there's 2 camera sensors on the back, but for a person using the phone, it really only behaves like 1 camera. It's the same way as if you were taking a photo with an iPhone or a Samsung phone or any other HTC phone. It's essentially 1 camera sensor, but next to it is another sensor that captures depth information. So the camera can tell how far things are away from it. So if something is 2 feet away and then 10 feet away and then 150 feet away, the camera captures that data and stores it with the file. From there, you can do things after the fact, like touch on a specific area of the scene in order to change the focus to a different point, or you can do things like remove the subject and do some kind of fun green screen type of effects with it, all right on your phone. It's very similar to, if you're familiar with the Lytro camera, this type of ability to refocus after your shot.
That's pretty cool. I really like that. Now, in my view, of course, there's the mass market, which is really dominated by Apple and Samsung. But among the aficionados of really good smartphones, there are really four big flagship phones. One is whatever the latest and greatest Samsung phone is, Galaxy S5, for example, the latest and greatest iPhone. The latest and greatest Moto X, of which there's currently only one that they've come out with, but we're expecting a new one this summer. And then there's this one. From a pure designy kind of point of view of hardware design, this phone probably does better than any other Android phone competing against the iPhone. From a sort of usability, warm and fuzzy usability perspective, they kind of have to compete against the Moto X, which is a beloved phone. From a raw power point of view, they have to compete against Samsung. Where do you think this new version fits into that mix? Is this going to really change the metric? Is this really like a killer phone that could, for example, get an iPhone user to convert or get a Moto X fan to convert over to the HTC One?
I think so. I think the design is definitely high-end enough to convert iPhone users. And then they've made the phone much more personable when you're holding it. It's much more comfortable to hold. Even though it is still a large phone, there's no getting around the fact that it's got a 5-inch screen and it's a big device. It's much bigger than a Moto X or an iPhone 5S, but it's still comfortable to hold in your hand, and that's important when you're using it every day. Whether they're going to be able to do that on the mass levels that HTC used to be a leader in the smartphone marketplace, and now they've fallen way behind the other companies. And whether this particular model is going to swing that tide for them is entirely another story that probably more comes down to their marketing message than the actual device itself.
Dan, also, I think one of the interesting things about the hardware industry right now is how quickly everyone's copying each other in terms of the quality of the camera and everything else. Do you have a sense of how sustainable some of these hardware advantages are? Are we expecting to see them in the Galaxy S5 due out soon and sort of the rest of the market?
Well, as far as a design perspective, I think the design is pretty timeless. I think the fact that they're using a lot of metal in the construction, in the glass front and stuff, there's not a whole lot of cheap feeling plastic. Actually, there's no cheap feeling plastic on it, to be frank. And last year, you could see last year's one was praised for its design, and it still looks really good today. As far as the specific hardware features, there's long been talk about the spec race and how it doesn't really matter anymore. Consumers don't really want a phone that has the fastest processor. They want a phone that just works really well and produces great photos and lets them browse the internet really quickly on the go and things like that. And so the HTC One hits most of those bars. The camera, unfortunately, in our test, didn't quite hit the same level of quality that we see from an iPhone 5S or even from a Galaxy S4 and very likely soon from the Galaxy S5. So the camera can be actually, despite its cool new kind of gimmicky features, the actual quality of the image isn't as impressive as some of these other models on the market already.
And my understanding is that a big feature that they were touting today is low light performance, which the iPhone does pretty well with, and also has a really good color fidelity. So I think iPhone is one of the cameras to beat in terms of camera quality. Now, this phone also has a 40% battery life improvement, and this is a claim by the company. We haven't tested it. Maybe you have. Have you tested the battery? I know you had a previous model.
Yeah, so we did our full review of the new one. We've had it for over a week now, and we did our full battery assortments and tests and things like that. And we found that this model lasted, quite well, easily lasting up to 30 hours, which is really into 2 days of good use. So I think that the battery claims are so far from what we've seen, the phone lives up to the battery claims. That was one of the things last year that was a little bit of a disappointment with the One.
And just very quickly, all the rumors were true, as I said earlier, but were there any facts that surprised you that weren't rumored?
Well, it's kind of interesting to see that HTC is taking a similar route of Motorola as releasing its actual core apps into the Play Store. I know that was kind of just kind of hit the rumor mill this morning just before the actual announcement, but they pretty much kept that under wraps as far as they could. And so now customers who buy an HTC One will have their camera app or their gallery app updated right through the Play Store instead of having to wait for the carrier to push it out, which is a great thing. The other thing that was kind of sort of rumored but never really pinned down was the fact that HTC announced this phone this morning, and you can walk into a Verizon customer, actually right about now, you can walk into a Verizon store and purchase the phone. Which is pretty incredible. Nobody's actually replicated that before as far as announcing a phone and then bringing it to market immediately. And so that's something that you have to give kudos to HTC on.
Yeah, that is very cool. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today and giving us this late information. I know you were involved in the event today, and so I really thank you for making the time.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You can find Dan at theverge.com and also on Twitter at DCSeifert. Let me spell that, DCSEIFERT. Well, in a sec, we're going to tell you what Walt Disney is doing with YouTube. It will surprise and amaze you, I think. But first, I want to tell you about Gazelle. Gazelle is an incredible site that will buy your used gadgets, your used phones, your used tablets, and they will give you real money for them, and a lot of it, too. You may be surprised by how much they'll pay. If you're thinking about getting the new Samsung S5 or the new iPad or a new iPhone or the new HTC One, then the best thing to do is sell your old gadget so that you can help fund your new one, and you can feel a little bit less guilty about spending way too much on gadgets because these things can be a little pricey. Just go to gazelle.com, that's GAZELLE.com, and find your item. Jason, let's take a look at the HTC One. If you have an HTC One right now, you're going to want to sell it and get the new HTC One. Let's see how much they'll give us for it. It's 64 gigabyte HTC One from AT&T. We'll see what they do with that. Jason's doing that on the video version. The great thing about Gazelle is you get paid fast in cash within a few days of the item being received. Offers are good for 30 days. So what we're seeing here is that if you have an old HTC One, now this is a pretty old phone. This has been around for quite a while. They'll give you $187 with a subsidized new HTC One that almost covers the cost of it. So, this is a lot of money for an older phone, and you definitely want to get the new one because it's the latest and greatest and has all the features we were just discussing. Gazelle will actually wipe your data free. So if you send in a device and it has some personal information, you don't have to worry about it. They will completely erase it so that it can't be recovered by anyone. Gazelle's paid more than $100 million to more than 700,000 customers. They'll send you a free box in most cases. They'll even buy broken iPhones in many cases. And that is a relief because a broken iPhone is completely worthless unless you send it to Gazelle, and they will pay you good money for it. So what's your Apple or Android device worth? Take a minute, go to gazelle.com to find out. Do it now because the device may lose value the longer you wait. Well, Walt Disney agreed to buy Maker Studios. The $500 million cash deal could be worth a total of $950 million if Maker meets specific performance targets. With us to explain this move is Tom Cheradar, staff writer for VentureBeat. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going great, thank you. Why would Disney spend so much on YouTube channels? I'm sorry, can you hear me?
You're breaking in and out a little bit, but let's try again.
Okay, let's try again. My question is, why would Disney spend so much on what is essentially YouTube channels?
I mean, there's been a lot of speculation on that, but over the past year and a half, these major legacy media companies have taken note because of the vast distribution channel and the results that these videos can get. And it's all stuff that if Disney tried to do this from scratch, it would be very difficult. It would be very difficult for them to go in and build up both content creators and amass the kind of following that Maker Studios can with their star players. And so it's kind of like them looking at it and saying, we need to be there, and they're so far ahead. Let's go ahead and buy them and bring them into the organization.
So just to be clear about what we're talking about, the scale of what we're talking about, Maker has 55,000 YouTube channels or thereabouts, 380 million subscribers, and 5.5 billion video views each month. It's a massive presence on YouTube. And I also understand that Disney is kind of thinking about using these sort of maker channels as a farm program for other Disney content. Is that your understanding as well?
They mentioned that in the official release, that they would like to kind of take this and imprint it on some of their other properties, which they would probably be very successful in doing. If you can get somebody to rap battle history, when you introduce Mickey and Minnie, which is a well-known brand that everyone knows about and wants, presumably enough people want to hear from or watch, you're going to get an equal amount of traction. So
this looks to me like a huge shift in the sort of acceptance of streaming online media, and YouTube in particular, by a massive traditional media brand. Disney, for example, already has more than 70 channels on YouTube, and almost all of those channels are just kind of promotional content to drive people to television sets and to movie theaters and stuff like that, games, whatever Disney does. And by embracing Maker Studios in this way, they're essentially acknowledging that YouTube is an extremely legitimate future-facing medium in its own right, and they are apparently all in.
Yeah, I think that that realization actually came quite a while back. It was more of watching these multi-networks, which is what Maker Studios is considered, and watching how they can grow as businesses. The top tier, like Machinima and Maker and a couple others, they've been fairly successful. We don't know how much profit that they're generating, but it seems to be the point is that these companies can't monetize their content well enough because they don't have the resources. That's certainly not a problem for Disney.
Tommy, I'm glad you raised that point, because I think the YouTube video world and the whole host of businesses developing programming for YouTube, we've kind of seen a shakeout. We've seen layoffs at Machinima recently, which is another big brand in the space. So, I don't know. What do you make of sort of the financial prospects for Maker? Obviously it doesn't matter now that it's part of Disney, but, that's a tough business. And I'm not sure that they were really, hitting it out of the park yet.
It's going to be interesting to see. Everybody's definitely taking note. This is the biggest sale of a multi-channel network that's primarily focused on YouTube content that we've ever seen. So we'll see if it pays off. I tend to think that they've got a pretty good shot at doing it. At the very least, you're going to be able to cherry pick a few of the big celebrities on Maker Studios and push them into the Disney world and hopefully get some of your money back.
Well, Tom, I'm sorry. Did you have another question, Jessica?
No, I was just saying that's a great point about, and we've seen this throughout the past several years in digital media, taking brands and personalities sort of incubated online and on YouTube and really, turbocharging them with shows and branding and sort of more traditional opportunities. So it'll be interesting to see if they do use it that way, that they have the power to do it. So
yeah, absolutely. YouTube plus tons of money plus tons of traditional media reach should be very, very interesting. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and explaining this for us today, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you can find Tom's work at venturebeat.com and on Twitter at TCHED. Well, the University of Southern California is offering a course on using Google Glass in journalism. Joining us to tell us about the course is the man who's teaching it, Assistant Professor of Professional Practice at USC's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, Robert Hernandez. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us what's involved in your Google Glass for Journalism course. What will you be teaching exactly?
Well, first, I'm not sure I would qualify it as teaching per se, but facilitating and leading a group of students that are going to be looking at the platform and the device and trying to develop news apps for it. I know you're a Glass user yourself, and the apps on there right now are pretty slim, and the news apps are, not to offend my colleagues in the industry, but pretty bad. So what we're trying to do is bring engineering students and journalism students, we have PR students, coming together to collaborate as equals and create new apps that would either create content, the ability to create content wearing glass, or, which I think has more potential, the consumption of content. How would an article look like through this device?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more because, as you said, I use Google Glass, and you can already see how you could use it for some aspects of journalism. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm glad you and your students are going to be working on that. But you can take pictures, you can take video, you can do interviews. It's not ideal for that, but you can do it, and you can use it just for your day-to-day journalism work. But from the consumption point of view, it's awful. There are breaking news feeds that you can subscribe to. They're terrible. Listening to content is not ideal. Watching video of anything longer than a few seconds is a miserable experience. And there's a lot of potential there, and I haven't seen anybody realizing it. So I'm glad you guys are zeroing in on that and are going to be working through those problems to figure out what can be done. Now, on your blog, you call yourself a hackademic. I love that. And you believe that journalists should learn to code. Now, these students will be writing glassware apps, won't they?
Yeah, I've been having a glass meetup on campus for a few months now, and I've met some engineering students who on the side were participating in hackathons and making their own glass apps. And we hit it off, and I said, why don't I offer a class where we can nerd out together for a whole semester? And so that's how this actually started. I don't consider myself an academic. I play with technology, and I hijack technology for the name of journalism. And so this, to me, is just in line with what I do at the university. I last semester taught a class about augmented reality and storytelling. And truth be told, I look at glasses as a gateway to making AR storytelling, contextual storytelling, as an essential step. So AR for me is where we're heading towards, merge with wearables. And it's all about the content. It's all about the storytelling. And for me, I'm looking at it through the prism of journalism.
Robert, what does Glass as a platform sort of bring to the news consumption experience that you think mobile doesn't? So,
Sure.
I think we're thinking of just headlines or something that doesn't really, I don't really need that here when I have it here. But can you elaborate more on what really lends itself to that augmented platform?
Sure. And actually, I have an informal partnership with App Breaking News, Circa, the Circa app, Newsweek. And we're going to be looking at the different types of storytelling, the different shapes of articles that these media properties produce and how they would translate to the device. I don't want to do shovelware. Journalism in our industry has done shovelware for every piece of technology. Here's a unique opportunity to experiment. Now, what does it have? If we look at those headlines, they could be we interrupt your regular programming, AKA your life, with sizable headlines, right? Really significant headlines. That might be worthwhile. But I'm really interested in the contextual storytelling. Whether we like it or not, Glass knows where you are, what you're looking at. It's mobile and has the power of the internet. So I could be looking at a building and get contextual information there. I could be looking at a historical monument and get information there. This is really making stories that are limited to your phone or this abstract space of the digital space and bringing it to the physical spaces, making it real life.
Now, of course, I imagine that most of your students will not be Google Glass explorers. They won't actually own Google Glass headsets. But by the time this course is, halfway through, it's going to be raining smartwatches. I hope that this course will also integrate wearable computing in general, not just Google Glass.
That's the goal. That's definitely the goal. It's not about Google Glass. Google Glass is a platform that has shown a lot of promise that is in the market, granted still being beta tested. But our whole point is, how will wearables change storytelling? How will it affect an article? How will it affect journalism? And Glass is definitely the platform we're looking at. But watches will definitely be something to keep an eye on. There's other devices out there outside of Glass that go over on your face. So we're going to play with those things as well. And you'd be surprised. I don't know what happened, but at USC Annenberg, we have about half a dozen Glass devices in the wild, and the class itself will have about 5. I'm hoping to make a partnership or contacts with Google to see if they can support us in some way. But we're going to be looking at a variety of different wearable devices. But Glass is mainly the main device that has an SDK, a GDK for us to develop and really focus on building something. we're not talking about this in an abstract and hypotheticals. We're actually going to build something with it.
Now, I have a request for you, which is your next course. I think you should do a class on virtual reality and journalism, because imagine a virtual reality app where essentially journalists could build or photograph or represent crime scenes and places where events take place, and then the consumer of that journalism could be immersed in those environments. I think that would be really killer.
That's pretty cool. I have a colleague named Noni De La Pena that's done some VR stuff, did some stuff with Second Life. And AR and VR do overlap a little bit, but there's something that I prefer about augmented reality versus virtual reality, is that augmented reality is real and accessible now, whether it's through your smartphone or your glass device. And it's about getting people to physical spaces. I don't need the holodeck if I want to recreate a crime scene, because the crime scene happened in a public place. So I can recreate that crime scene with AR. And that's kind of where I'm going toward. But VR definitely has some potential down the road.
Well, Robert, I want to thank you for coming on, and I hope that you'll come back when you're at the end of the course and maybe bring some students and some apps with you, and we can take a look at how it all went.
That'd be great. I'd love to come back.
Wonderful. Well, you can find Robert at webjournalist.org and at Twitter at webjournalist. Great Twitter handle. Well, the world's biggest eyewear company is partnering with Google to make Google Glass headsets. You may not have heard of the Luxottica Group, but you've probably heard about the companies they own, including RayBan, Oakley, LensCrafters, and Sunglass Hut. They also license luxury brands to make sunglasses for Giorgio Armani and Prada. Well, this is an interesting step toward the sort of mainstreamification, if you will, of Google Glass. Jessica, what do you think? Would you wear Prada Google Glass headsets or sunglasses even?
I would sure wear them over the current incarnation if I had a choice. But no, I think so. I mean, I actually wear glasses sometimes, wear contacts other times. If it's compelling enough, I think I will certainly wear them. If the cooler they look, the better. I think it's going to be a question of what kind of features are going to be in there. And we were talking earlier, Mike, I mean, I think the camera, right, is one feature that, maybe we're kind of on the edge of creeping some people out or not. So I think part of the mainstream adoption curve of this kind of product will be, sort of putting some features into some of them and not others, because I think that'll make it more appealing. But I'm definitely game to try it. I think it's cool that Google's reaching out and striking these partnerships. It's still so early. It still feels just a little bit like marketing and, trying to show people and get people to really imagine wearing the product themselves. But, I don't think we're there yet where people are going to be rushing out to buy these. But I think it's a good marketing move to show that there is some cool coming to the dorkiness. Yeah, and I certainly hope so, because I've pretty much had enough of the dorkiness. And I'm also looking forward to a new generation of sunglass holes. So something to look forward to. Well, Jessica's own The Information published an exclusive this morning by Amira Fradi about a major effort by Google to compete with Apple in the enterprise space. And so, Jessica, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you. As a guest to talk about this. So what business-specific features is Google working on? Several. So, I mean, I think Android today, really doesn't have a lot of what the CIOs need and want to deploy devices to their companies. And some of that is the type of encryption that's possible, the capabilities of the chips, even being able to sort of provision through the App Store an app that's only available to people within your company as opposed to the public. VPNs, but basically specialized apps and more security are kind of what it boils down to. And as Amir reported, it's something that's coming in the next version of Android, the sort of L version. And, it's important. I think it's actually remarkable if you look at the corporate mobile device market right now. Several years ago, it was RIM. Believe it or not, now it's increasingly the iPhone, which was a product line that back in 2007, 2008, CIOs sort of laughed out the door, sort of saying it didn't have the kind of encryption and security they needed. That's obviously changed, and I think Apple deserves a lot of credit for what it's been able to do in the enterprise. But I think we're going to see Google take this very seriously. And of course, Google's also got the tablets and the Chromebooks and sort of the whole shebang. But this is a sign, I think, that they're really going to address some of those key features that CIOs need and have been asking for.
Now, Apple, as I understand it, became popular in the enterprise by being a great consumer device to a certain extent. I mean, the bring your own device thing really brought Apple's iPhone into the enterprise because people like it. And also they built some security-friendly features into the phone, not just for the enterprise versions or whatever, but for everybody. For example, if you listen to the most recent episode of Security Now here on Twit, Steve Gibson was going into extreme detail on how incredible the security is in the iPhone. Just the ordinary plain vanilla iPhone that you can buy at the Apple Store has monstrously good security. It seems to me like Google is taking a different tact, and the more traditional tact, where they're looking at security-specific and enterprise-specific features, as opposed to building their basic operating system be enterprise-friendly.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. And, you know, the difference in the Android ecosystem, of course, is that the hardware maker is also sort of responsible for a lot of this. And so Google has the Android OS, but the individual capabilities is also going to be done in conjunction with the phone makers. So I think there is a lot you can do on the OS level. There's even a lot you have to do on the hardware level, though, in terms of the chips and their capabilities. And you know, the fact that Apple controls that whole stack, you know, gives them an advantage in sort of pushing things like this. But I think Android in the enterprise is going to be very interesting. I mean, a big theme that we're hearing a lot these days is, you know, Android does offer more flexibility than iOS does. And for companies developing certain types of apps or wanting to sort of use the hardware and software in certain ways, you know, having a whole fleet of devices available to them with lots of different capabilities and that might progress faster at different rates than the iPhone is something that matters to them. And that's going to be competitively, Apple's always going to have to keep up with, you know, the fact that Android just has more options. And I think, you know, on one hand, IT departments don't like options. They would like to have one model that acts a certain way. But when you start to get into different types of functionalities, more flexibility in what kind of apps you can build and how you can use the hardware, Android has the advantage there.
Now, I'm a little worried about Sundar Pichai. Once upon a time, he was in charge of Chrome OS and Chromium, the Chromium project. Then he became in charge of the Chromebook platform when that came out. And then when Andy Rubin left, he took over Android. When they came out with Google Wear, he took over that. It seems like every new initiative, he's in charge of it, and he's in charge of this one, too. I wonder how thin they can stretch this guy.
Right. Well, Sundar, has a growing number of responsibilities, a big team, too. So, I mean, he's got a lot of help, but it's a great point. I mean, there more and more is rolling up to him as Google tries to sort of better integrate and get these divisions to work together. You know, something Amir pointed out in his story, which I think is very interesting, is that you know, Andy Rubin, the sort of prior Android chief, you know, had not emphasized the enterprise. I mean, his philosophy had been get Android into consumers and the rest will follow. And I think maybe partly in due to differences in the leaders, but probably more just where adoption is now. You know, this is really a Sundar-led effort. But the difference between sort of how much each emphasized it is pretty clear. And you know, I do think in general, sort of Sundar's new approach to his growing suite of apps is a story to watch in the industry. I'd
take Andy Rubin's job any day. He gets to play with robots.
Absolutely.
So that's a pretty sweet gig. Well, in a sec, we're going to tell you about a really crazy project at the Internet Archive. But first, I'm going to tell you about Squarespace. If you want to look like an absolute website genius, a designer genius, an engineering genius, Squarespace will make you look like a genius even if you don't really know how to do any of these things. And the reason is that they make building a beautiful website incredibly easy. It starts with 25 beautiful templates for you to choose from, and then you can modify it to your heart's content until you have a website that is exactly what you're looking for. You can add pages and features and modules, just plug them in. You can try different things, mix it up, moving them around. It's incredibly flexible and easy to use. If you ever want help, of course, their tech support and chat by both chat and email is open 24/7. They also have some tutorials that will help you learn how to be a better kind of webmaster. It's super easy to use, and they also have e-commerce for every subscription plan level. So if you want to sell something, if you want to take money for your nonprofit, if you want a cash wedding registry, a school fund drive, it's super easy to do. And it all starts at just $8 a month. And that includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. Squarespace is famously mobile ready. So your website will look fantastic on a tiny phone, on a medium-sized tablet, on a laptop, on a giant screen. It will always resize itself and rearrange itself and redesign itself to a certain extent to carry through on the original beautiful design, but native to the device that people are looking at. It also has a metric app for iPhone and iPad that lets you check your site stats, which is very helpful. And there's a blog app that helps you make text updates, tap and drag images, change layouts, and monitor comments on the go. Very powerful. We live in a mobile world, and so Squarespace's mobile readiness is an incredibly great feature. And of course, hosting is included. Squarespace takes care of all of that, so you don't have to. So start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT. That'll get you 10% off, and it will also show you support for Tech News Today, and we appreciate that. We also thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. And remember that a better web awaits, and it starts with your new Squarespace website. Well, the Internet Archive is planning to digitize, are you ready for this? 40,000 VHS tapes. They're going to encode them. They're going to put them on the site. And this is all according to a feature on Fast Company written by Sarah Kessler. But here's the thing. All the tapes were recorded by a single woman. Her name is Marion Stokes, and she obsessively recorded TV shows for decades. Digitizing the collection will cost an estimated $500,000. And, you know, among shows that she just happened to be a viewer of, she was also a TV producer, and it includes a show called Input that she produced between 1968 and 1971. Jessica, this seems like a lot of money to digitize what is basically mostly crap television. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, that it's cool that this stuff happens. I mean, we don't want some of this stuff to get lost. And I sort of share that sentiment or sentimentality, but you know, it's hard to sort of see the practical use cases, but, you know, who knows? Researchers in the future might have access to it, and I'm all for, you know, making sure we preserve these as format switch. It seems like a good thing to do, but certainly a Herculean effort.
Well, Jessica, I want to thank you for joining us today as our guest co-anchor. It's always great to have you on. I love your insights, and I really enjoy following the information.
Thanks. Really enjoy being on.
So again, you can find Jessica's work and the work of her incredible staff at theinformation.com. Well, I want to urge you to subscribe to Tech News Today. There are many ways to do it, and one of them is just to go to twit.tv/TNT. Take your pick. You can subscribe to the audio version, the video version, whatever you like. You can also follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. Subscribe to our subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com and leave us voicemail and tell us what you're thinking about by calling 260-TNT-SHOW. Also, don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific, tonight and every weeknight. My name is Mike Elgin. I thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.